As mentioned by Prof. Goh, I think those areas that we are going to look at this afternoon will indeed be covered by our speakers on how AI can be as useful in creative writing, in the professions, in interpreting and translating, as well as in finance, as well as in assessment. So those areas are indeed something that we can consider this afternoon, and you have a chance to speak to our speakers then. We will now begin with the first segment of our forum. Each speaker will be presenting for 25 minutes, and there will be a question and answer session, which is part of the panel discussion. You may ask your questions then. Without further delay, let me introduce our first speaker, Mr. Felix Cheong. Felix is the author of 27 books across different genres, from poetry to fiction, from children's picture books to graphic novels. He has also written opera librettos in collaboration with composers Jonathan Shin, Chen Chang-yi, and Ho Chung-shi. He is the winner of the NAC Young Artist Award in the year 2000, and he has been invited to writers' festivals all over the world, such as those in Edinburgh, West Cork Island, Austin, Sydney, Brisbane, Christchurch, and Hong Kong. His paper is entitled CollaborAItion, Creative Writing Using AI. Felix, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So welcome to this talk. I think I shall just skip to the agenda first. So we'll look at first the future, how it is already here, that AI or the use of AI is actually not something new in the arts. Then I will look at my own collaboration with AI as a writer, as a creative writer. So let me just skip this. So over the past couple of years, my creative practice has been to merge poetry with graphic novel, and how the graphic novel can be can accommodate the form of poetry. So in 2020, I published this book in the year of the virus. Then this series called Sprawl, which has nothing to do with Gibson's series mentioned by Prof. Goh. Another book, If and the Lost Ghost Family. And the second book in the Sprawl series, which is also a trilogy, coming up, the third book probably next year or the year after. And these are two upcoming graphic novels, and they're written in the poetic form. And that's been my experiment over the past couple of years. How is poetry malleable enough to be fitted into a graphic novel? So the first book, which is due probably next month, akan datang, it's a biographical look at the former Deputy Prime Minister, Dr. Goh Keng Swee, who was Lee Kuan Yew's chief troubleshooter, and this book called The Showgirl and the Minister. So the future is already here, as Prof. Goh already said. Now, AI in the arts has actually been around for quite some time. It's not really anything new per se, just that it's come into the popular imagination thanks to ChatGPT. So for example, back in 2017, this singer used AI to compose music and the music was produced by an AI machine. And then in 2020, this band called Uncanny Valley produced a song called Beautiful the World, and that actually won the Eurovision Song Contest, and it was produced using AI. All right, thanks. So rather mechanical, rather robotic, piece of dance music, but it was generated and produced by AI. And then sometime last year, this particular painting, quote-unquote painting, won the first prize in the digital category of the Colorado State Art Fair. So it's beautiful. It looks like a classical Renaissance painting, but it was produced by AI, Mid-Journey. And then back in earlier this year, this particular artist released a short film called January, which was entirely produced by AI. So using tools such as ChatGPT, and this is what the result is. Note, it was produced in 24 hours.
As the world becomes more and more industrialized, artists are finding it harder and harder to find a space to create. They are constantly being pushed out of the city and into the countryside, where they can find some peace and quiet. But even in nature, they are not free from the clutches of technology.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'll talk about irony. There you have it. And then this photo was also created using AI, and it won the Sony World Photography Award. And you notice that the fingers are not quite human-like. And that was one of the earlier problems with Mid-Journey, the AI generative tool for images, but it's getting better. So the fingers are now more realistic looking. So with the accessibility of ChatGPT, as Prof. Goh mentioned, increasingly the trend is picking up. Lay people are using it to generate all kinds of things. Earlier this year, you had a photo of Pope Francis that went viral, of him wearing this puffer jacket, and everyone thought it was a real image, but it wasn't. So the lines between what is real and what is fake becomes increasingly blurred. You have also in the creative writing circle a lot of novels, collections of poetry that are also produced by AI, ChatGPT. So this graphic novel, for example, was produced by AI. And this was the first children's picture book produced entirely by AI. Quite cute, right? This was the first AI-generated comic book. The story, the graphics, everything done by AI. And you have the first book published in, of all places, South Korea, entirely generated by ChatGPT, with a kind of nondescript title, 45 Ways to Find Purpose in Life in South Korea. I hope using ChatGPT is not one of the purposes. And you also have attempts at poetry using ChatGPT. This book, for example, by this chap called Jonathan Milton Schneider, entirely published and generated by AI. So there are all these creative works that have been generated and produced, composed, published, but there are still these 5 issues that are still outstanding and still being discussed. For example, the infringement of copyrights. A lot of graphic artists and illustrators have complained and have filed lawsuits against ChatGPT and Mid-Journey for infringement of the copyrights and the acknowledgement of artists, because the AI, of course, gets its database from established existing work. Jobs are at stake. So, for example, the current Hollywood writers' strike, one of the reasons is the fear that AI will take over their jobs. The speediness of the creative process, as we saw that video, that short film, was created in 24 hours, which is not possible for humans to do it. Yeah, so the process of creating something has been sped up. You do not even need to know the skills really to write a story. You can be creative in your prompts, and then lo and behold, you get the story there and then. So where's the agency in that? So that's the next problem that is going to be discussed in my talk. And also the element of creativity. Apart from the fact that you can be creative in your prompts when you type into ChatGPT, where else can you account for your own creativity, your own input as a creator, as a human being? So my mission or my experiment over the past few months has been to tackle these two issues with regards to agency and creativity. Can a writer use or collaborate with the ChatGPT in a way that serves his purpose? Okay? And therefore, ask the question, can AI ultimately trump a writer's creativity? So I started using this, trying this experiment with ChatGPT sometime in early May to June, because I was commissioned to write a graphic novel called The Showgirl and the Minister. Provocative title, you should buy it when it comes out in December. It's inspired by this chap. Not sure whether any one of you know him or remember him. He was Singapore's second chief minister, Lim Yew Hock. Our first chief minister was David Marshall, and he was the one between David Marshall and Lee Kuan Yew. So he ruled Singapore for about 3 years when we were still under the British. So sometime after he was defeated at the general elections in 1959, he lost the elections to PAP. Then he took on Malaysian citizenship. And he was appointed as Malaysia's High Commissioner to Australia. But the strange thing is, I came upon this interesting, curious fact, this incident. He disappeared in Australia for about 10 days in 1966. And there was no record of where he went to or how he disappeared. And then he surfaced 10 days later, incoherent about where he was. And there were a lot of newspaper articles published about his liaisons with this woman, a 19-year-old stripper at King's Cross. A lot of intrigue, a lot of interesting sidebars and stories that you can create around this black hole of 10 days during which he disappeared. He talked about it afterwards, but it was rather incoherent. So this stripper is called Sandra Nelson, and strangely enough, coincidentally enough, she disappeared for about 10 days during that time. So you can put 2 and 2 together to make 5. Where exactly did the two of them disappear? Okay. She claimed in a newspaper interview 10 days after he disappeared and when he resurfaced that she had no idea where he went to, without explaining where she herself had disappeared to. So it was an intriguing story for a writer, for me, to come up with a story. So I started working with my partner in crime, Elvif Rafhan, a Malaysian artist. We had published 3 graphic novels before this. And I started pitching this book to Penguin Random House. They liked the idea. And we signed a contract. So I started drafting the plot. And that's one of the initial covers that we did. Now, 1966 was a turning point in human history. So this was when America was in turmoil. There was the flower power movement. There was the Vietnam War. Things were turned upside down. 1966 was also just a year after Singapore gained independence. And there was a war between Malaysia and Indonesia called Konfrontasi, or the Confrontation. We also had a bombing at McDonald House in 1965 that was planted by Indonesians. So my concept was to put Lim in the middle of all these tangles and confluences of history. That maybe he disappeared because and I was speculating, of course, it's fictional, creating fiction out of non-fiction, that he was part of this whole intrigue, this spider web of events that happened, that somehow the KGB was involved in this. So I had all these different strands that I wanted to pull together, but I was stuck. The proverbial writer's block. So I turned to Mr. ChatGPT for help. So I started feeding it a few prompts. First, I tried the first run, which was just keying in the synopsis of the story, what I had pitched to my publisher. And I found out ChatGPT is extremely vague in details. For those of you who have used it before, you probably know this. You often get broad sweeps of things, because by its nature, it spits out generalities. So the more general input you put in, the more general output it spits out. The development of the story is often cliched. There are often abrupt turns of plot. So for example, sort of halfway through the story, Lim suddenly is hiding out in Moscow for no rhyme or reason. There's no development of him being sent to Moscow. Abrupt introduction of characters, like suddenly the Australian intelligence agency is involved. So he also seems to think that just because the story is set in Australia, you need to involve Australian agents. And the ending tends to be very happy and contrived. So not very happy about it. I tried again, second run. So I produced all these screenshots to show you that I actually did it, that I'm not bluffing you. So this time I added a prompt that Sandra Nelson was set up as a honey trap for Lim to try to blackmail him into betraying his country. It started drawing up all these tropes and cliches from espionage novels. So all your stuff, James Bond stuff, or the spy who came in from the cold, it starts putting in all these tropes. But it also makes certain wrong assumptions. For example, it seems to think mafia means it must be an American organization. And as we know today, the mafia can also come from Fujian, right? So there's also this plot point of Lim being moved from safe house to safe house. Again, abrupt introductions of characters, elements that were not there. And also, if it somehow forgets this character called Sandra Nelson, the stripper, and then suddenly shoehorns in towards the end. So I did it again, third run. But interestingly, in this run, after having forced it twice to do something interesting, it shows me that Sandra Nelson has a change of heart. From being a honey trap, he becomes an informant. So I'll just skip quickly to some other runs I did. For example, I introduced a character, a detective. So he manages to build in the detective as one of the main characters. And overall, it doesn't give me anything I couldn't have thought of myself. Okay. Again, equally vague in details, 10th run, 11th run. There's this interesting bit about how this detective has links to the intelligence community in Australia. So that I factored into my plot. So I made the detective a former intelligence officer. 17th run, I was that patient. Okay. But after 21 iterations, I gave up. It wasn't going anywhere. I also tried to use it to write poetry, because my entire graphic novel is written in poetic form. So you can see on the left, the ChatGPT's idea of writing poetry, which is to force rhyme, but I adapted some of the lines into the actual manuscript. Okay. So for example, this line, what leverage will this have, actually is a variation of a line from ChatGPT. So it doesn't quite give me what I wanted, although it has some inkling what I wanted. But ultimately, it is the writer who has control over the story. So ChatGPT, after all that's said and done, for a creative person like myself, the plot development is often bland and generic. As one of the other writers, Gonzalez, said, the details are often vague. It doesn't have a sense of place, for example, or setting. There are often abrupt or random insertion of characters out of the blue, or he forgets a character and then suddenly shoehorns the character in. It can't plot longer stories. For example, if you're writing a 200-page novel or a 1,000-page novel like Lord of the Rings, it can't do that. It loses track of the plot line soon enough. And then the ending often tends to be contrived, happy, or offer some kind of moral lesson to the reader. So what is useful is first, it provides a template for you to get started. So if you are stuck, like I was, it was a good way to pick ChatGPT for ideas. And it provides occasionally interesting takes, suggestions, where to take the story. And it's often a sounding board for a brainstorming process. Yeah, so I use it as a way to bounce ideas off it, as I would with a fellow writer. And sometimes it does provide interesting lines that you can modify. But there again, you need that creative input, your own agency as a writer, to cherry pick what is good, because ChatGPT can't do it for you. And these are some pages from the book itself. Okay. And with that, I thank you.